Melissa Sue Anderson stepped onto the set of Little House on the Prairie in 1974 with the quiet poise of someone far older than her years. Viewers saw a calm, disciplined Mary Ingalls, but behind the camera, the real Melissa lived with a stillness that few understood. While other cast members laughed between scenes and formed easy friendships, she often found herself standing at a distance, carrying the weight of storylines that demanded unshakable focus. What audiences never saw was how the emotional demands placed on her shaped every moment she spent on set. As a child, she was asked to portray grief, loss, and resilience with remarkable depth, and the seriousness of her work set her apart. She was respected, admired, and undeniably gifted, yet that same talent created a quiet divide. The truth of her isolation is not dramatic or whispered. It is far more human, a young actress navigating maturity, responsibility, and the emotional cost of excellence. Melissa Sue Anderson entered the world on September 26, 1962, in Los Angeles, a city full of noise, motion, and dreams. Yet her earliest years were marked by a quiet steadiness that would follow her throughout her life. While other children ran toward attention, Melissa seemed to carry a natural sense of discipline even before she understood what that word meant. Teachers noticed it, so did neighbors. There was something still and observant about her, as if she absorbed more than she spoke. Her entrance into acting came almost by accident. She began appearing in commercials as a child, small roles that required patience, timing, and an awareness far beyond her age. And even in those earliest jobs, directors saw the same thing. A young girl who listened carefully, responded precisely, and carried herself with a gentle seriousness uncommon among children in the industry. Success did not come to her through loud energy or playful charm. It came through quiet professionalism. That quality would become both her gift and the invisible wall that sometimes separated her from others. By the time she was 12, her reputation as a reliable young performer was growing. Casting directors had begun to notice that Melissa could hold emotional weight on camera, the kind of depth that could make even simple moments feel real. So when auditions opened for a new family drama set on the American frontier, she was invited to read for the role of Mary Ingalls. She stepped into the room with her soft voice and calm gaze, and something clicked immediately. The character needed steadiness. She offered exactly that. Joining Little House on the Prairie in 1974 would change the entire course of her life. The set was alive with activity, children laughing, animals wandering between takes, crew members rushing to build the small world of Walnut Grove. For a 12-year-old, it could have been overwhelming. But Melissa took it in with that same quiet composure that had defined her early work. She watched, she learned, she followed direction with a precision that surprised even the adults. Still, the transition was not simple. The demands placed on her were far greater than anything she had faced in commercials. Little House required long days, emotional storytelling, and an ability to deliver a steady, believable performance week after week. Many child actors approached the set with playful energy, forming tight bonds and enjoying the looser moments between scenes. Melissa, however, approached it like a young professional. She memorized her lines with care. She stayed focused even when others drifted. Her calm nature, while admired, subtly set her apart from the more outgoing children her age. Some of the cast noticed her quietness. Some respected it. Others misunderstood it. But for Melissa, it was simply who she was. A young girl navigating a world that demanded both vulnerability and discipline. The storylines given to Mary Ingalls often leaned into emotional restraint, tragedy, and inner strength, and Melissa carried that responsibility with a seriousness rarely seen in someone just entering adolescence. In those early months on the Prairie set, she found herself stepping into adulthood long before her peers. The crew relied on her. Directors trusted her. When a scene required stillness or depth, she delivered it without hesitation. But that same commitment meant that the easy camaraderie shared by other child actors sometimes felt out of reach. She wasn't aloof, she was focused. And the very maturity that earned her praise also created a gentle divide, one that would only widen as her storylines became even heavier in the years to come. Those beginnings shaped everything that followed. Melissa Sue Anderson entered Little House on the Prairie as a quiet, disciplined 12-year-old, but the role would soon ask far more of her than anyone could have predicted. The seeds of her future isolation were planted not by conflict, but by the rare seriousness she carried into every single scene. As the seasons of Little House on the Prairie unfolded, Melissa Sue Anderson stepped deeper into the role of Mary Ingalls, with a maturity that surprised nearly everyone around her. Playing Mary required a level of emotional steadiness rarely demanded of someone her age. While many child actors were asked to deliver light-hearted moments, Melissa was given storylines built on responsibility, restraint, and the quiet dignity that defined Mary's place in the Ingalls family. It was a role that needed calm strength, and Melissa carried it with remarkable grace. Across the years, she filmed 163 episodes, an astonishing accomplishment for someone who began the journey as a 12-year-old. With each season, her character was asked to grow older, wiser, and more measured than the youthful castmates who surrounded her. This early separation, born from her role rather than her personality, created a subtle but lasting distance. While other children were free to play, laugh loudly, and drift easily between the make-believe world of Walnut Grove and the real world behind the camera, Melissa often stood apart, preparing for scenes that demanded emotional precision rather than carefree innocence. The show's long hours intensified this divide. Days often stretched far beyond what most children could comfortably manage, but Melissa approached the work with strict discipline. She memorized complex emotional beats, met deadlines, and carried a quiet responsibility that mirrored the character she portrayed. Her work ethic did not go unnoticed. Michael Landon, both producer and star, set exceptionally high expectations for the entire cast, and he relied on Melissa heavily. Her ability to deliver emotionally layered scenes made her one of the most trusted young performers on the set. But that trust came with pressure. Mary Ingalls rarely lived within light-hearted storylines. She endured hardship, disappointment, and moments of deep emotional pain, scenes that required Melissa to access feelings far beyond the typical experiences of adolescence. To meet these demands, she remained centered, focused, and often alone. It was not isolation created by conflict, it was the necessary quiet of a young actress protecting the emotional space she needed to do her job. Her temperament also shaped this separation. Melissa was naturally reserved, observant, thoughtful, and steady. These qualities, which made her such a compelling presence on screen, sometimes made socializing difficult in the fast-paced energy of a busy set. When the cameras stopped, many of the children ran off together, laughing and unwinding. Melissa, however, often remained with her script, preparing for the next moment the story would require from her. She found comfort in routine, not commotion. And while the other cast members cared for her, her calm nature simply moved at a different rhythm. The emotional weight of her storylines contributed even more. As Mary's world grew heavier, especially in the seasons leading up to her blindness arc, Melissa spent long days in intense scenes. Maintaining the emotional truth of those moments required focus, and that focus left little room for light conversation or relaxed gatherings during breaks. She was not avoiding others, she was preserving the emotional continuity her character demanded. Her dedication led to something rare. She became the only cast member ever nominated for an Emmy for their work on Little House on the Prairie. It was an honor that acknowledged her extraordinary commitment. But honors often come at quiet costs. The very qualities that lifted her performance, her discipline, her seriousness, her maturity, built a gentle barrier around her. This was the beginning of her isolation on the Prairie set, not created by distance from others, but by the gravity of the role, the expectations placed upon her, and the quiet nature that had defined her since childhood. By the late 1970s, Little House on the Prairie entered one of its most dramatic chapters, and at the center of it stood Melissa Sue Anderson. The gradual blindness arc, introduced as Mary Ingalls' vision began to fade, demanded an emotional depth that few young actors could carry. Yet Melissa approached it with a quiet strength that revealed just how much she had matured. This was no simple storyline. It was a transformation, one that required her to understand fear, grief, acceptance, and resilience, all before she was old enough to fully grasp them in her own life. The intensity of the blindness arc shifted her entire presence on set. Scenes grew heavier, the emotions sharper, and the weight of Mary's journey pressed closely against Melissa's daily work. She no longer prepared for quick moments or light-hearted family scenes. Instead, she stepped into hours of filming built on silence, sorrow, and determination. Her performance in these episodes became one of the defining accomplishments of the series. It was these moments of heartbreaking honesty that ultimately brought her major critical acclaim, including the Emmy recognition that set her apart as the only cast member ever nominated for such an honor. But to reach that level of authenticity, Melissa needed something rare for a young actress: isolation that wasn't forced but necessary. The emotional focus required to portray blindness demanded long stretches of concentration, often separating her from the lighter, more carefree moments happening around her. While other castmates rehearsed comedic scenes or filmed episodes centered on schoolyard mishaps, Melissa prepared for sequences where Mary struggled with loss, uncertainty, and the difficult process of relearning her world without sight. The School for the Blind storyline deepened this separation even more. Much of the filming took place away from the main Walnut Grove set. New locations, new supporting characters, and a new rhythm of storytelling created a physical distance from the cast she had grown up with. While the others continued building their childhood memories together, sharing jokes, practicing dances, and navigating the natural ups and downs of growing up, Melissa's work took her to quieter corners of the production, where emotions were heavier and scenes carried a slower, more contemplative pace. Portraying Mary as a teacher for the blind added another layer to this transformation. In these scenes, Melissa carried authority and adulthood on her shoulders. There were no playful breaks or light-hearted mischief. Instead, she stood as a young woman guiding others through experiences of loss and rebuilding. It was powerful, meaningful work, but it aged her emotionally ahead of her peers. She stepped into a leadership role on screen long before she reached adulthood in her real life. During these years, Melissa was transitioning into young adulthood, while many of her castmates still lived fully in childhood. That natural shift alone created distance. She no longer shared the same interests or the same free time rhythms. While the younger actors played between takes, Melissa used breaks to center herself, breathe, and prepare for the next demanding moment. Her work required calm, patience, and an emotional stillness that didn't always blend easily with the lively energy surrounding her. What emerged from this period was a quiet evolution. Melissa grew more independent, more reserved, and more focused on her craft. It wasn't a withdrawal, it was growth shaped by the gravity of her role. The blindness storyline had changed Mary Ingalls, and in many ways it changed Melissa as well. It asked her to balance youth and adulthood, to carry emotions far beyond her years, and to keep herself steady through some of the heaviest narratives the show ever produced. By 1981, something subtle but unmistakable began to shift in Melissa Sue Anderson's journey. After years of carrying some of the show's heaviest emotional arcs, she found herself facing storylines that no longer held the same depth or purpose they once did. The writing for Mary Ingalls began to narrow, offering fewer opportunities for the layered performances that had defined her early work. Melissa herself would later describe some of these later storylines as leaning too far into melodrama, lacking the emotional grounding that had once allowed her to deliver such powerful, honest portrayals. For a young actress who had built her reputation on authenticity and quiet discipline, this change mattered. She had grown up on the set, maturing from a reserved 12-year-old into a thoughtful, driven young woman. And with that growth came an evolving sense of what she needed creatively. The demands placed upon her in earlier seasons had shaped her into someone who approached each role with intention, and by 1981 she felt the natural pull toward new challenges beyond the familiar rhythms of Walnut Grove. Her departure that year marked a turning point, not only in her life but in the emotional landscape of Little House on the Prairie. Mary Ingalls had been central to some of the show's most unforgettable moments, and Melissa's presence, steady, composed, and deeply felt, had helped define the heart of the series. Walking away was not a rejection of the work she had done. It was an acknowledgement that she had reached a moment where growth required stepping into something new. Still, her connection to the show was not severed entirely. She returned briefly in the 8th season for a series of guest appearances, offering viewers a glimpse of Mary's life as an adult, still shaped by the resilience that had carried her through some of the show's most intense arcs. These appearances served as a quiet bridge between who she had been as a child star and who she was becoming as a young woman, ready to explore a wider creative world. What made this transition even more distinct was the natural shift in her relationships on set. By the time she reached her late teens, many of the younger cast members remained firmly in childhood, full of laughter, energy, and the kind of innocence she had long since grown beyond. While she cared for them and respected the bond they all shared, her emotional maturity set her apart, creating a gentle distance that reflected how much she had changed since those early days. She wasn't the quiet newcomer anymore. She was a seasoned performer who had spent nearly a decade navigating long hours, intense scripts, and the quiet pressures of early fame. Leaving the show in 1981 closed a chapter that had shaped her identity in profound ways. It was the end of the era that had introduced her to millions of viewers and taught her discipline, resilience, and the strength of carrying stories that demanded emotional truth. Yet, it was also the beginning of her adult career, a moment where she could redefine herself outside the boundaries of Mary Ingalls, stepping into roles that allowed her to explore new facets of her craft. Her exit was not dramatic, nor was it clouded by conflict. It was simply a young woman recognizing that she had given everything she could to a character who had grown up alongside her. And with grace, quiet determination, and the same professionalism she had shown since childhood, she stepped forward into the next phase of her life, carrying with her the lessons and legacy of the years she spent in Walnut Grove. Leaving Little House on the Prairie in 1981 opened a new chapter in Melissa Sue Anderson's life, one defined not by the demands of childhood stardom, but by the steady, thoughtful choices she made as an adult actress. She stepped into roles that allowed her to stretch her abilities in different directions, appearing in projects such as The Equalizer, where she continued to bring the same discipline and emotional clarity that had shaped her earliest performances. These roles did not carry the same constant visibility as her years on Little House, but they gave her something she had long needed: space to grow at her own pace, guided by her own instincts. Her life also expanded in ways far beyond the screen. Melissa married writer and producer Michael Sloan, a partnership rooted in stability, shared creativity, and a quieter rhythm than the one she had known in her youth. Together they built a family, raising 2 children and carving out a life that allowed her to step back from the public eye while still honoring the craft that had shaped her. This balance between work, independence, and family became a defining part of her adulthood. In 2009, she published her memoir, a reflective and grounded account of her years in the industry. In its pages, she wrote with honesty about her work ethic, her solitude, and the emotional demands that had followed her from childhood into early adulthood. Rather than dramatizing her experiences, she examined them with the same measured calm she had carried throughout her career. The memoir offered a rare window into what it meant to grow up on a set where expectations were high, hours were long, and emotional intensity was required from someone still finding her place in the world. One of the threads woven throughout her reflections was the role of isolation, how it had shaped her, not only as a performer but as a person. From the early days when her quiet temperament set her apart, to the years when emotionally heavy storylines pulled her away from the lighter moments shared by her castmates, solitude had become a constant companion. Yet, rather than weakening her, it sharpened her professionalism. It taught her how to focus, how to prepare, and how to carry responsibility with a maturity far beyond her age. This isolation also nurtured a sense of independence that followed her long after she left Walnut Grove. She learned to trust her instincts, to choose work that aligned with her values, and to step back when she needed space rather than staying in the spotlight, simply because it was expected of her. As an adult, this independence gave her the freedom to build a life that felt authentic, one anchored by family, creative partnership, and a quiet confidence earned through years of sustained dedication. Looking back at who she became through those early experiences, it becomes clear that her journey was never defined solely by fame or by the challenges that shaped her childhood. Instead, it was defined by the resilience she carried, the craft she respected, and the ability to move forward with grace even when the path demanded far more from her than it did from others her age. Today, Melissa Sue Anderson stands as someone who navigated the unique pressures of childhood, acting with rare steadiness. Her roles after Little House, her marriage to Michael Sloan, her children, and her reflective memoir all paint the portrait of a woman who grew not in the shadows of her past, but because of the strength she found within it. In the end, Melissa Sue Anderson's story is not defined by the isolation she carried, but by the strength she gained from it. From the demanding scripts of her childhood to the thoughtful choices of her adult life, every step shaped a woman who learned early how to stand steady in the quiet moments others often overlook. Her years on Little House on the Prairie taught her discipline, emotional honesty, and the weight of responsibility, lessons she carried into every role, every chapter, and every part of the life she built beyond the screen. Her memoir revealed a woman who understood herself with rare clarity, someone who could look back without bitterness, who could recognize the sacrifices of her youth, and who could honor the resilience that allowed her to move forward. She became in time not just a performer shaped by solitude, but a mother, a partner, and an artist who chose a life rooted in authenticity. Her journey reminds us how strength can grow quietly, and how independence can bloom from the softest beginnings. For more emotional stories, check out this video.